this as we go along. It is certainly true, I would say, particularly to Alexandra and Yousif, that there are people who sign up for MAPA webinars knowing they cannot attend live, but knowing that in fact the video will be posted in short order so that they can then re-watch the webinar at their own convenience. So know that even though the number of people who are with us at the moment may not be so big, there will be lots of other people both, watching maybe on YouTube or on Twitter, and then looking at the recording at a later date. So Allison, it's all yours.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who was able to hop on today. As Sunny mentioned, I think a lot of people are zoomed out these days. So definitely thank you so much for taking the time and hopping on. So just to introduce myself, my name is Alexandra Cedarbaum. I use the she, her pronouns, and I am originally from New Jersey, but I'm currently a sophomore at Tufts University, which is how I got involved in Massachusetts Peace Action. And tonight we're going to be discussing the Massachusetts ballot questions that are most relevant to our work at Massachusetts Peace Action and the peace and justice movement, because as I'm sure we all know, global peace is a very valiant goal, but we aren't able to get there if we don't start at home in our local communities, in our state, and in the United States. So we are very excited to discuss ballot questions 1 and 4, which are to do with public safety, immigrant rights, fair taxation, and more. So with that, thank you again for coming, and I think I'll pass it back to Sunny to talk about our first speaker.
So welcome, everybody. I am delighted that you're with us tonight, and we'll hope you encourage others to listen to the recordings as we go forward. It is my privilege and honor to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Alexandra Piñeros Shields, who is at the Heller School at Brandeis at this point in time, but for many years, while Alexandra was the executive director of ECHO, the Essex County Community Organization based up here on the North Shore. She and I got to work together on particularly immigration-related justice issues, but some other issues also. So it is really wonderful for me to have her back with us tonight on this issue, addressing how we, in a very limited public safety measure, take a step that hopefully will move us toward a greater situation of fair and just treatment for immigrant persons in our state. So Alexandra, it's all yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sunny, for that kind introduction. It was my honor to work with you and all your community up in Gloucester all those years. I have fond memories of those. And also having learned a lot of valuable insights from your work over the years for justice, for peace, and for the rights of immigrants. So thank you, Sunny. I would like to begin by telling you a story, and I'm going to share my screen, so if you give me a minute. Okay, so I want to make a few points, and they fall within this idea that what we're seeing with the battle for driver's licenses can be understood as a diagnostic tool. So we'll come back to that, but I wanted to put that in your mind. So in 2017, in Salem, where I live, a woman, let's call her Maria, was living with her husband and their daughter, who was born with severe problems and from birth was unable to move. they were undocumented. The daughter needed weekly medical interventions, so they had to drive to Mass General on a weekly basis. The husband, they owned a car, and the husband drove the car. The wife, even though she knew how to drive, was afraid of driving because they were undocumented and they didn't have driver's license. And she knew, which is part of the point, that if you get pulled over and you don't show a driver's license, that is how you enter into the system of detention and deportations. And in her mind, she thought, if I get deported, who will care for my daughter, who needs so much care? Who will care for her lovingly? So one day, the husband wasn't feeling well at home. He started having pain in his chest, and it progressed, and the wife knew that she should call the ambulance. But immigrants also know that when you call the ambulance, the police also come. And so instead of calling the ambulance, she called a taxi. And by the time the taxi came, it was too late. Her husband had died of a heart attack. So I tell this story, it is a dramatic story. It is a heartbreaking story, a terrible story. But on a personal level, immigrants need driver's licenses because for many, it is a question of life and death. It's a question of access to healthcare for many. It's a question of family unity, which is also a question of life and death, of being torn apart from your children. It's also a question of women's independence from their male partners. And it's a question about child development. It's an issue of child development. Those of you who have children know that we spend an awful lot of time in our cars transporting our children from here to there, from there to here, so that they can have opportunity and development. So I wanted to acknowledge these various elements and say that the ballot question before us is a very simple one. It is asking us, the population of Massachusetts, whether all immigrants, regardless of legal status, should have access to driver's license. And of course, they have to show proof of who they are, and they have to, before they drive, they will have to buy car insurance and, have all the requirements that the rest of us have. If they need glasses, they will have to wear glasses, right? But it's simple as that. And as you probably know, but I'll repeat it, this this issue came before the state legislature for the very first time. I started working on this. Many people in the community started working on this 22 years ago. I'll say that again, 22 years ago. And it has, for the very first time, came before the state legislature, and overwhelmingly, they voted in favor of it. You probably also know that Governor Baker vetoed it. He had said he would veto it. He vetoed it. And we had enough votes in the state legislature to override his veto, which is an unusual thing to have. And now, unfortunately, we have to win again. In 2009, I was a part of Governor Deval Patrick's initiative. It was an executive order, which sought to create an immigrant integration plan for the state of Massachusetts. So we worked for almost a year, the team, and we did many policy roundtables, research, but we also had 9 hearings, public hearings across the state, and for immigrants themselves to speak out. And those look differently. The communities designed them differently across the state. But regardless of the area in the state and the type of forum it was, the number one demand from immigrants themselves was driver's licenses, as far back as 2009. And you can read the whole report. It's about 109 pages. It was called the Massachusetts New Americans Agenda. It's easily accessible online. So I often use the metaphor of the canary in the mine, right? That the canary's miners used to take the canary down into the mine as they were working and kept an eye on the canary that they would bring down, because the canary's respiratory system is more sensitive to the toxic fumes of the mine. And so what I often tell the people that I work with, that I do organizing with, to my students as well, is that it's not about the canary. The canary is just fine, right? It's about the mine. And so driver's licenses are about the canary, right? They're an intervention for the canary. I want to understand, what is this issue of the driver's licenses telling us about the mine, about the society that we live in, about the country that we live in, the country we are becoming? What can our 22-year-old battle tell us about our mind? So one thing, and I have 3 points I want to make. First is that there's one of the things that is happening is that it creates a burden on municipalities and the state. By not making driver's licenses available to all drivers, municipal and state law enforcement, I misspelled that, I will correct it. Law enforcement are placed in the position of having to enforce federal immigration policy. That costs us money, and it also leads to militarism. It leads to what we can call the building of a police state, the building of a security state. And I know in particular, this audience, we are all interested in fighting militarism. But by seeing what's happening with driver's licenses, we can tell that actually the diagnostic tool of driver's license is telling us that this is an excuse or a method of increasing law enforcement and increasing militarism. Before I say the next point number 2, which is basically a little bit of history, I want to remind us, I'm sure you all know this, but being undocumented is not in the criminal code, it's not in the civil code, it's an administrative violation. If any of you have been to an immigration courtroom, you'll know, first of all, that it's not in a courthouse, it's not in a federal courthouse. So in Boston, it's at the JFK Federal Building. Because why is it not it's not part of the judicial system, it's not in a courthouse. When you go into an immigration courthouse, and I'm sure Sunny, who's been a long-term advocate and ally of immigrants, has been to one, there is no jury. Why is there no jury? Because it's not a criminal case. There is often no defense attorney. Why? Because unless an immigrant has money, then gets one, you're not given a public defender because you're not being accused of a crime. And often, if the judge is having a good day, the judge will suggest some things that the immigrant might apply for to improve their immigration status. So these are immigration courts are courts in the executive branch of government. This is an administrative violation, not a criminal violation. So I just a reminder that we're talking about things that are not crimes. So in 1924, the United States government, for the very first time, created an Office of Immigration Affairs. And as it does, it puts it into a department. And just for the sake of, I usually have this as a question and answer game. I don't know. Well, maybe you can unmute yourself. What department do you think? Like when I say department, I mean like Department of Education, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Defense. What department do you think they put the Office of Immigration Affairs in 1924? Any guesses? Come on, be brave.
I just allowed everyone to unmute themselves, so.
Thank you. Thank you. Any guesses?
Interior.
Commerce.
Interior, that's a really good one. Interior is a really good one, but it's not right. Department of Labor. And who is the Department of Labor charged with dealing with? What kinds of people?
Workers.
Exactly. In 1924, immigrants were understood as workers. In 1940, you know what's happening. They moved the Bureau of Immigration Affairs from the Department of Labor into what department do you think? Any guesses?
Defense.
Defense, right? We're in a war. That's a really good guess. Close. We moved it to the Department of Justice. And who is that department in charge of dealing with?
Accused criminals.
Criminals, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a shift from immigrants as workers to immigrants as criminals. In 2003, they did many things. They moved the Bureau of Immigration Affairs. At that point, it's called INS. And they moved it to what department? You should all know this one.
Homeland Security.
That's right. And who's the Department of oh, I gave it away. Well, you already knew. Terrorists, right? So immigrants as workers to immigrants as criminals to immigrants as terrorists. And you can also put race on top of this, right? As we move through time, immigrants move from being white European and Christian, let us not forget religion, to being darker skinned and from non-Christian places. Muslims in particular are being targeted. So I would like to suggest that not granting driver's licenses adds to this dynamic of criminalizing and labeling immigrants as terrorists. Once they get into the system of detention and deportation, they are processed as terrorists. And it's guilty until you prove an innocent, especially if you're male, especially if you're Muslim, especially if you're Black. So, right? Lack of drivers leads us to systems of mass incarceration, the profiting off of Black and brown bodies, the targeting of the poor, of Muslims, of trans community, the surveillance of Black and brown bodies, and increasingly the building of a military state. And so once again, I care deeply about Maria and her daughter and families like her. But I also am interested in understanding what this says, not just about individual families and individual immigrants, but what it says about what we are allowing to get a firmer hold in our society. So, call to action. I think later on we'll have more information, but right now it's not looking good. It's the polling is about 50-50. And so we need all of you to act. One way to act is tomorrow at the Essex County Community Organization, which is the organization that I used to work with, based in Lynn on the North Shore. They will have a 2-hour banking, phone banking. So it's predictive dialer. So it dials very quickly. You don't even have to dial. It will keep automated, keep dialing until a registered voter. And I'm not sure what universal voters are using, but they're really smart. And they're part of the statewide campaign. So they've developed the right target of voters. And to talk about this important ballot question, they will also be talking about, and this is you can register for it by going on that bit.ly/EchoCanvas22. And they will also be talking on the super important, just as important question, ballot question number one. And so I want to hand it over to my colleague to teach us about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. That was incredibly informative. Thank you so much for all of that. So yeah, that was a fantastic transition. We're now going to be moving on to discussing question 1, the Fair Share Amendment. So I will pass off to our speaker, Yousif, who is the Regional Director of the Fair Share Amendment Campaign and the Director of the North Shore Labor Council. He's a former educator and current union organizer. And he is very dedicated to ending the crushing underinvestment in our public schools and transit systems, which is something that the Fair Share Amendment deals with directly. So with that, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. And that was a great presentation. I'll just echo what she said. Yes on 1 and yes on 4 are both crucial to pass this year. I'm really happy to be organizing alongside the Yes on 4 campaign. Uplifting working class people and uplifting immigrants is crucial for a healthy state. So thank you all so much for having me here. My name is Yousif Abdallah. I got a really great introduction, so don't have to go into that. I'm the North Shore Regional Director for the Fair Share Amendment. Now, what that is, it is the campaign in support of question 1. Now, if we pass question 1 this November 8th, it will place a 4% tax on every dollar made over $1 million in income. Now, that's a lot of money, so that will only affect about 0.9% of people in Massachusetts, $22,000 people to be exact. Now, even with that small percentage of people being taxed, it would raise $1 to $2 billion a year in tax revenue. Now, that's a lot of money that can go towards greatly uplifting our state. And what's best about this tax revenue is the way we wrote this ballot question. It is constitutionally guaranteed every tax dollar raised can only go towards education and transportation. Yeah, literally 1%. Only go towards education and transportation. Right now, I don't know if y'all have been reading the news lately, but our state has been having some troubles with their public transportation system, with their roads and bridges and education system. At this point, if you want to ride the T, you're more likely to have your train catch on fire than you are for it to come on time. And we're in a state of catastrophe with that. This money, $1 to $2 billion a year, could go greatly towards rebuilding our education system. We have some schools in the North Shore and across Massachusetts that haven't been repaired in 50, 40, 30 years. We now have teachers who have classrooms of 30, 40, 50 kids with 6 languages being taught in those classrooms, with 6 languages being in the classroom. That's why we're seeing teachers leave en masse. This money could greatly go towards maintaining those teachers, giving them the pay raises they've long deserved. Also with our roads and bridges, I don't know about you, I'm really tired of hitting potholes and getting my tires changed. I would love to see those get repaired. We see across the state dozens of bridges in vital need of repairs. All that to say, this money is crucial. It will help us a long way to make the state that we all deserve to live in. Now, we're seeing a lot of opposition. We're seeing a lot of millionaires and billionaires and corporations funnel millions of dollars into this campaign to make sure this tax doesn't pass. And in the process, they've been spreading a lot of lies. One of the bigger ones I'm hearing is this is going to affect home sales. This is going to affect the working class and middle class when they go to sell their home, right? And I'm not going to lie, they are right. This will affect home sales, but about 1 to 2% of home sales again. And that's because this tax would only affect the capital gains, the profit made from a home sale. So let's say you buy a house for $200,000, then 10, 15, 20 years later, you sell it for $1.2 million. That tax, not going to affect at all because your profit's only $1 million. You wouldn't be taxed a penny. On top of that, you get to deduct any home improvements. So that $50,000 swimming pool, that nice new kitchen that costs $20,000, so on, so on, so on, you get a deduct. On top of that, each individual that sells their home gets a $250,000 deduction, $250,000 deduction. If you're a couple, that's $500,000. So add those 3 different types of deductions you get to put on your home. The homes you would be selling would have to be worth millions, have to be increased millions of dollars in order for you to be taxed by this. And even if you do sell your house and after all the deductions, you make a profit of $1.2 million, I think there's the only $200,000 of that $1.2 million to be taxed at 4%. I think that's worth it for having the schools, roads, and bridges and public transportation system we all deserve. Now, another argument I've heard is, listen, the money's good, right? All this money raised would really help us, but we can't trust the money will go towards education and transportation. And again, I understand that. My parents raised me right. They raised me to always say please and thank you, always tip, and to never trust a politician. I understand it. Here's the thing. We had our best lawyers on this. This is constitutionally guaranteed. Around the gas, we've seen this with the gas tax, right? Pass the gas tax, we put the same constitutional language around it. People were saying, oh no, this will be cents on this, that, this. Gas tax was guaranteed to go to roads and bridges. We have not seen a cent of that money go towards anywhere else. When they tried to, they had every lawyer, watchdog group, union jump on the state legislator and sue them every different way. And since then, they haven't gone away. Same thing with this $1 to $2 billion. that will be raised annually every year. It cannot be spent on anything else. If the legislature tries to do something, we have some of the biggest unions, some of the biggest parental organizations, some of the biggest student organizations that would have every lawyer from here to kingdom come suing the state legislature. This money is constitutionally guaranteed to go towards education and transportation. Now, another talking point, I gotta make all the big hits, gotta make sure I cover all my bases. Another big talking point we've been hearing is, well, hey, we got all this federal money coming in from COVID. We have this big state surplus right now that's going back in taxes. Why do we need this money? And I agree, right now, we have a good amount of cash, right? That's why me, as a director of the North Shore Labor Council, I've been going into these union contract negotiations for the bus drivers union, for the teachers union, for the train drivers union. I've been going to these management, these principals and saying, listen, we have all this federal cash. Why can't we spend it? And they all say, yeah, we do have all this money. It's one-time money though. We can spend it on one-time things. We can't guarantee we'll have this money in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And to hire a social worker, we're not just hiring them for 1 year. We're hiring them for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. We will hire a teacher when we expand our bus routes, when we do scheduled maintenance on roads. This is long time spending and we need a long time funds. This budget surplus and this federal aid is one time. If we pass this tax, it'll be $1 to $2 billion a year for decades and decades and decades. It's the money we need to build the state we deserve, to give our students an opportunity to succeed, to give our working class, middle class people an opportunity to get to work on time, and just build a state that's profitable for everybody. Now, I don't have the presentation. That was a really good one, but I think with my hand talking, I helped out a lot. Just to cap this off, we have an opportunity as citizens of Massachusetts to take democracy into our own hands and change the state for decades to come. We're polling pretty closely, right? Some polls have been saying 51%, some polls have been saying 55%. Either way, it's getting close. The reason is they're pumping out those lies. How we break down those lies is by having average people, having people from the community talk to their friends, talk to their family members, and talk to their community members. So I'm imploring you, please come to one of those beautiful canvases or phone banks that was talked about with Echo, or just simply text your friends. The amount of family members I've split to yes, just because I gave them a call during dinner. I just talked to them. We win this by being organized and by reaching out. They have the money, we have the people. And I'm really excited to answer any questions, and I'll shoot my phone number and email in the chat. I'm always open to talk if you have any more questions. And thank you so much. So, Sunny, did I do a good job?
Absolutely.
Thank you so.
Right.
All right, that was great. Thank you so much. So I think now, before we get into a good section where we're going to take some questions for our lovely speakers, first, I just want to go into a little bit more detail about how to get involved. It's amazing to be able to learn about these issues, but ultimately it's at the ballot box where we're able to make a difference. So aside from voting yourselves, which we hope if you're able to do that, that's something you have a plan for, or you've already done with early voting well underway by this point. And of course, by using your own network, sharing information with the people you have in your life, using social media if you're on it. I do want to talk about some of the specific ways you can get involved with the different campaigns. So let me quickly share my screen and get into that. So starting off with Yes on 4, there is a statewide coalition campaign that MAPA is part of, but it also is completely relying on grassroots efforts and passionate folks like yourselves to get involved. So here is a list of different volunteer events being run by the campaign itself, as well as partner organizations. So I think ECHO should be listed on here at some point. And I will put all of the links to this in the chat while y'all are asking your questions and hearing the answers. So you can sign up at the end of our webinar. So it's categorized by location. So regardless of where you are, you'll be able to join. There are also some virtual events. These are just mainly phone banks as well as canvases for Yes on 4. And then if you want to just generally join the campaign in these last few days, you can sign up here. And again, I'll send the link in the chat for this. You can sign up to receive updates from the campaign so you can stay informed. There will be a lot more polling numbers and information coming in the next few days, especially as get out the vote efforts really are underway. And If you are able to, you're always welcome to donate to the Yes on 4 campaign. So this isn't MAPA specifically, but rather it is the coalition organization as a whole. So if you aren't able to get out and do something on your feet or anything like that, this is another great way to contribute if you're able. Moving on to the Fair Share campaign, similar resources here. Also a lot of great information on this website. So I'll link to the website as a whole. There's a way to sign up generally on the campaign. There is a list of events, lots of different ones coming up, lots of canvases, lots of phone banks. You can sign up to get a lawn sign. There's also some merch that you can get from the Yes on 4 campaign if you want to show your support in your community. Especially, I know there's lots of candidate lawn signs up right now, so you can also focus on some of the issues. You can pledge to vote yes on the Fair Share Amendment. This is another great, super low pressure, low effort way of making a difference. Just showing your support can go a long way. And of course, donating as well as you have the means for Yes on 4. So I will throw all of those links in the chat, but I do just want to emphasize once again how vital it is that we take the information and the understanding of these issues and we share it with others. I know lots of people get to the ballot and they don't even really know to turn the ballot over and read in detail what these questions mean, and they sort of just vote on default. So making sure that people are as informed as possible and reminding people of the importance of these issues and sort of dismantling some of those misconceptions that the opposition for both of these campaigns have been putting out there is absolutely vital. So please use the resources that you have, the time that you have, and make a difference in the best way you can. And I will be throwing those links in the chat, and then at the end, we'll have a couple more minutes to remind y'all to get involved. I think with that, we can turn over to the Q&A, Sunny.
So questions, comments, insights that you would like to share as you have thought about these issues? People can either put their question in the chat or you can raise your hand and we'd be happy to let you engage directly with the speakers and participants with your question. Mary Ellen?
Hi there. Thank you, Sunny. This is a really important webinar, and thanks to the speakers. Let me put my hand down a second. I just wanted to throw out really more of a comment, and it's directed to Dr. Piñeros Shields, that I live down on the South Coast and we're having this very heated race for sheriff. And unfortunately, it is also neck and neck. What has occurred to me is that the question, the mobilization that to overturn question 4 seems to be feeding into the efforts to defeat the contender for Sheriff Hodgson, the person that we want to get rid of. So I was just wondering if you had any comments about that. And yeah, that's all.
You're muted, Alexandra.
Yep. Mary Ellen, I think I had not thought of that.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think your analysis is correct. He's been one of the worst sheriffs in the country.
Right.
And
Alexandra, say a little about why you say he's the worst sheriff.
So he has fought really hard to keep contracts with the enforcement, the immigration and customs enforcement, which is the police branch of the immigration function of our federal government, which was created in 2003 when they moved it to Homeland Security. They divided the services from the enforcement, which has created a whole set of problems. And the other, so he really wants to penalize immigrants. He has a really deep hatred. It seems almost personal. But what I find very interesting it is those of us who are organizers often try to get public officials to come to hearings. It is really hard, even officials who are public officials who are on our side. And over the years, and we've been at the State House for 22 years fighting for this particular benefit. He is always there. He's like the only sheriff. He makes time in his schedule because he is so intent on penalizing and criminalizing immigrants. I almost feels like when you hear him talk in person the way I have at the State House, it's this like just deep hatred. I mean, he's probably really racist as well, and it's a pure hatred. So it's hard to listen to him. So I always feel like, so that's an important battle. And yeah, I think your analysis is right. I think there was maybe something else will come to my mind. I thought I had something else in my head, but I've lost it. So I'm going to give the mic back to Sunny.
I would just add, one comment about an element of the Yes on 4 campaign that's kind of a contradiction. And that is, in its reality, Yes on 4 is a very narrow public safety effort that will improve the safety of the roads for all of us by greatly increasing the number of tested, licensed, and insured drivers. And so the campaign really, in fact, focuses on those public safety issues, trying to make the point that it's not about all the bigger immigration issues, except, of course, there is a way in which it is about those larger immigration issues, and that it is one more small step in the effort to make life more humane and more just for immigrant people. But it is probably a good idea in starting conversations with anyone that we all focus on the public safety issues. So the canary, if you will, rather than the mine, but there is no way that making a presentation for a mass peace action group that we were not going to talk about the problems in the mine, whether that is immigration or fair share. So just to add that comment. And I think, Yousif, didn't I see your hand earlier? You wanted to jump in with something?
Yeah, I had a softball question for the doctor. Where is this ballot question going to be on the ballot?
Thank you for asking that question. My understanding is that it's going to be on the back, right? So
Well,
it's not in the booklet that they sent to voters. And it's also, so if you don't turn it over, you're not going to see it. Am I right, Sunny?
yes, except with a qualification.
Okay.
I don't think in any ballot it is on the front of the ballot, neither 1 nor 4.
Okay.
On those communities with shorter ballots, all 4 of the ballot issues are on the back of a single-sided ballot. I've been following the Yes on 4 weekly field updates, and there are some communities that, in fact, have 2 pages of ballots, 2 pages of items to vote for on their ballot. And so in some of those communities, it is all of the ballot issues 1 and 4 are on the back, or maybe on a second page, or even more complicated on the back of a second page. So if people are doing canvassing in particular, there are some communities, some counties that have ballot issue number 5, so that there are more than 4 ballot issues in some communities. So if you're doing canvassing, it's really a good idea to, in fact, know what the ballot is going to look like in the community in which you're doing canvassing, so you can address that particular issue with people. And the other thing I learned today at the Yes on 4 field meeting today is one of the questions has been, why wasn't question number 4 in the voter information booklet that was mailed to all voters in Massachusetts? That was an issue of timing. By the time that the signatures got collected and the issue got certified for being on the ballot, there in fact wasn't time to get it into the booklet. But what has apparently happened is that now in a PDF form, the Secretary of State's office has sent to all of the clerk's offices in every town and municipality in the state the question number 4, the yes position on 4, and the no position on 4. And so it is a very good thing to do for all of us in our home communities to call up our local clerks and assure that that information is being printed and made available at the very least in the clerk's office at City Hall or Town Hall, as well as posted on your city's website. So if people are wanting to read not just our campaign position, they can actually read the ballot issue. So sorry for that long logistical piece to add, but they're important details to keep in mind as things unfold.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you so much.
Other questions or comments or suggestions about approaching these issues from anybody who is involved or is going to be involved?
I have a question for Alexandra. You had mentioned a little bit about the opposition against this campaign. I was just sort of curious if you could elaborate a bit on the rhetoric that they've been using and ways that we can try to combat that as a community that's working towards stronger values as well as public safety, of course, and immigrant rights as a primary ultimate goal.
Yeah. So my understanding is that in order to get enough signatures, so when they were collecting signatures on the petition, they were not transparent, that they were somewhat devious, and it's like, oh, this is about driver's licenses. And so I have heard stories of people who actually wouldn't have signed it. But now and by the way, and this is what I was thinking of earlier, but then I forgot, it left my mind, is in Salem during the Trump administration, we the same week that he was elected, the undocumented immigrant women that I was working with decided that they wanted, and they had worked on raise up ballot questions like sick days and raising the minimum wage and earned family time. So they knew how to collect signatures and said, well, let's collect signatures to make Salem a sanctuary city. And I was like, well, I'm not sure that's going to work, but they actually did it. They collected almost 4,000 signatures in the city. But we had a city count after a lot of organizing and publicity. We had a city council hearing in which we won. And then within a couple of months, people in Salem who weren't happy, started to collect signatures. And they did exactly that. They were misleading to get the signatures, but they got enough signatures in the city to get it on the ballot in the city. And so then the immigrants were like, we're not going to work on this anymore because we're exhausted. We already won. And now, so they gave up. They're like, we raise our hands. And so the Unitarian Church and some other congregations led the second round. And so for all of us in Salem, it's like deja vu. And it's very similar tactics. First, one is to get the enough signatures. And then once they have enough signatures to get people out to vote, it's the politics of hate. And it's about law and order that we should not be rewarding immigrants for illegal behavior and labeling them as illegal. So it's really important to note that technically that is incorrect, that undocumented people are not, they haven't committed a crime. That language is the language of hate. So, one of the questions I have in my head is like, so how do you, and it's a question I often ask myself because the law and order argument, I think resonates with a lot of people, which is why I think this is polling 50-50, right? We are raised to think that law and order, and what I often say to people is, crossing the border illegally is extremely dangerous. Hundreds of people die every year. I know women who have told me that they prepare when they need to cross the border, mostly to bring their children back because they've left children. They prepare to cross the border by starting to take birth control because they know they will be raped. Nobody prepares for rape as a fun thing to do, right? It's awful. Those women and the families pay a lot of money to coyotes to bring them across the border. So if they can raise money and borrow money, they would much rather fill out a form and pay a fee. So immigrants also want a legal, orderly path, right? It's not, immigrants don't want the wild, wild west.
Right.
And likewise, immigrants would rather have a driver's licenses and have insurance. Nobody wants to be driving around and by accident. And then I've had situations, and actually just the other day, yet again, a friend of mine got hit, was in an accident, rear-ended by someone who didn't have a driver's license. And that's a really scary thing for an undocumented. They want law and order too. I don't know if they would say law and order, but they want legal, orderly processes. And so this, having driver's licenses makes it orderly. Right now, it's the Wild West. I don't know if that's answers your question, Allison, but it's the best I could do.
Well, and I would add a comment on the tactics that are being used both against question 4 and question 1. So one of the major lies, outright lie, that folks are saying about question 4 is that it will automatically register people to vote. Excuse me. That is absolutely not true. This is a different, you cannot register to vote without a US passport or a US birth certificate. And you do not have either one of those if you are not a fully documented immigrant to this country. So it is absolutely false that this measure will enter people to be able to vote. This particular piece got very muddied by Governor Baker by his saying that indeed he didn't know if the Registry of Motor Vehicles had the capacity to check for proper documents. Well, if you've been to the registry anytime in the last 10 years, you know how thorough they are about checking. And that is actually a huge insult to workers at the registry that they can't properly check people's documents. Similarly, on question 1, the big push is a lot coming through the television ad that is doing all of the poor me stuff that Yousif referenced about, well, my life savings in my house, in my business, in my farm. I'm a poor farmer, and it's the poor farmer that's in the commercials that I see that, I'm going to lose my life savings if this tax goes into effect. So I would invite you, Yousif, again to comment and walk a bit through what actually is at risk of being taxed, so people can counter that if they're out talking with friends or doing canvassing.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will real quickly say about Yes on 4 when talking about how to talk to some of our more conservative folks. I've been making the rounds to some of our more working class unions, factory workers, building trades. These are conservative folk who've been continuously spoon fed just straight up lies. Right? And the biggest lie we're seeing is voter registration. Now, what I've been saying as soon as I go into these union halls is, I want you to go to your city hall right now. I want you to register to vote. They're not going to ask for your driver's license. If the driver's license was the only thing that's stopping voter registration, we're going to have thousands of people registering to vote, right? It hasn't happened once, because if you register to vote and you're undocumented, you're facing 5 years in prison, tens of thousands of dollars in fine, and being deported from your friends, family, community. It's just not going to happen. And on top of that, too, this is a safety issue. And the majority of police chiefs in Massachusetts, not a liberal bunch of people, right? Not a people who are the biggest fans of immigrants, I would say, on average, right? They understand this is what we need to make a safer community, and they've endorsed it, right? And they preach it everywhere. Salem, Lynn, Boston, you can go to any major city, any major town, the police chief has endorsed it. So I just had to say that right there. Going into the fair share amendment, again, what we're seeing, again, just more lies. They're getting these really good ads. I love the Taxachusetts guy, the guy like on the boat. I think he's my favorite person ever. I'd love to grab beer with him. But they're pumping out these lies. They're saying, oh, these poor farmers, these poor small business owners. Now, I'm not an economist. I'm not an accountant. But I have read the studies put out by Harvard economists and accountants, and they've said that only 3 to 1% of people will be affected by this, right? Just because after all these deductions we get, because again, we're taxing the capital gains, we're taxing the profits made. So after all these deductions, after all these loopholes you can go through, it would affect a small portion of business owners and farmers, right? And I will say this too, even if you do make a profit, a taxable profit of over $1 million, it's worth it. If you sell for if your taxable profit is $1.2 million, meaning your actual profit was way, way more than that, right? $2 million, $3 million. If your taxable profit is $1.2 million, you're paying 4% on the 200,000 over $1 million. And that's worth it to build the state we deserve. It's worth it to not have a train system that's catching on fire every other month. It's worth it to not have a commute time just filled with cars, right? Bumping up to an hour. To have classrooms that are clean, safe, and properly staffed. So we got to really push against these lies. We got to call them what they are, lies too. I think sometimes on the left, we can be a little bit nice. Call them out for what they are. Rich people and racist people afraid of, their community changing. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Well, any final question or comment before we turn back to Allison again? Alexandra.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Sunny said. So I feel like I'm among friends here. And so I gave a much broader analysis. Mm-hmm. But my understanding is that we cannot win on driver's licenses unless we find the lowest common denominator, because right. It's so close. The lowest common denominator is safe roads. And so I urge you to use that argument, especially with people who you need to move, right? I mean, but for the rest of us who care about peace, I wanted to bring in right. some of my thinking on a larger, more macro level. But right. I agree with Sunny. We have to focus to win this in the short term. To win this ballot initiative, we need to use the narrowly defined public safety, road safety argument. Thank you.
No, I think it's absolutely true. This is a narrow public safety, safer roads initiative. And hopefully it is the only first of many steps towards improved immigration justice and fair share issues that we can achieve in this state, which is why here we put it in its larger context. And again, using Alexandra's terrific analogy, we take a look at this tiny piece in the context of the larger mind, and hopefully we'll win these two issues this year after the years of effort on both of them, so we can actually advance on some of the other community justice issues that we need to be pursuing. The final thing that I would say before I turn it back to Allison is again listening to in the Yes on 4 field meeting today, the strong reminder of getting out and joining phone banking and canvassing as soon as possible. We live in a COVID world. Huge numbers of people are voting early, voting by mail, so that some of the historic past impulses of saving major canvassing and phone banking to the last minute and just the last few days before the actual election day on November 8th are not necessarily true this year. So sooner is better. This is the week to move.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all of our speakers and to Sunny for all of the incredibly insightful points you've made. Are there any other questions? Just one last call. You can unmute yourself or throw something in the chat. If not, then I will just turn back to this call to action that Sunny had mentioned. It is incredibly important over the next few days to make as much of a difference as you possibly can. If that's after work or just any moment you have time, there's so many different ways that you can get involved. I do have all of those links thrown in the chat. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take just a couple of minutes and sign up for something, whether that be to join the campaign as a whole and learn more about the different ways you can get involved, to sign up for just one phone bank, for just one canvassing event, for either of the campaigns. Anything you can do makes a huge difference. Requesting a lawn sign, anything can be incredibly impactful. So I am going to share my screen and do this myself as well, while y'all take a couple of minutes to do this. And then, thank you, Yousif. And then we'll be just about ready to wrap up after that. So 2 minutes on the clock. And please sign up.
Another thing to perhaps think about while you're signing up is in many communities, the Democratic City Committee or town committees have introduced ballot issues 1 and 4, and they are doing canvassing for candidates as well as 1 and 4, all in a unified effort. So if you've got a local candidate that you're really committed to, check out whether or not you have a local campaign that's doing everything together, like I know we're doing up here on Cape Ann.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So I think we're just about ready to wrap up. But I just want to one more time reiterate how important these state issues are to the global peace and justice movement. Even on a more logistical level of the exact impact that these measures are going to have. If we're able to dedicate more funds to transportation, that means we can put more investment in green transportation. We can work on, promoting electric vehicles and things like that. There are so many differences that we can make, even with these state bills, that will have a global impact. Particularly, with immigrant rights, it's almost too obvious, but the role that U.S. militarism has played in so many countries, particularly in Latin America, in driving that immigration and those refugee crises, it's absolutely imperative that we do our part on this end of things to support the folks that have been forced out of their homes and to make them as safe in this community as they can possibly be, and to respect peace and justice within our own communities. So unless there's anything else, I think we can call it, but thank you so much to our amazing speakers. Great points, great information. I know I learned a lot. And thank you to the people who dedicated the time to hop on tonight.
Thank you. It was great.
Thanks to everyone, Alexandra, Yousif, Allison, Brian, Mary Ellen, who put out a lot of the advertising for us. So thanks everyone, and let's keep our fingers crossed and get back to work.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all. Excited to see you on the doors and on the phones.
Thank you, everyone.